Multimillionaire shocked the poor mechanic with, "You're fired." What he revealed was incredible. The morning air was thick with the scent of rain, as Mark Thompson tightened the last bolt on a rusted engine. He wiped his brow with a grimy rag and stepped back, admiring his handiwork. Just as he felt a fleeting sense of accomplishment, the clank of the door shattered his moment of peace. In strode Jason Mercer, his black suit glimmering like a shark's fin, eyes sharp and predatory. The harsh light from the overhead bulbs caught his smirk, and Mark's heart dropped. "You're fired," Mercer spat, his voice booming through the small workshop, reducing Mark to silence. Mark could barely breathe. The weight of the humiliation enveloped him. The gasps from his customers felt like daggers. Memories of his grandfather filled his mind, years of hard work, respect earned, now all crumbling as Jason continued to berate him over the vintage car that Mark had dared to touch. In that moment, Mark's world tilted. He had always believed in hard work, in the intelligence of labor. Now, it felt as if that very belief had been spat on and strewn into the wind. The thoughts raced through his mind. Had he truly failed? His painstaking efforts, his dedication, all dismissed with a few venomous words. Desperation began to claw at him. Could he rebuild? Just days ago he had been proud of his shop, but now it felt like a prison decorated with tools he had once cherished. He looked down at the oil-stained floor, questioning everything. Could he really fight back? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications, so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. For the next few days, Mark wrestled with his pride. Each time he passed the empty shop, anger churned within him, twisting at his gut. How could one man wield such power over him? He began sifting through the clutter in search of anything to regain his footing. And then he stumbled across the old journals his grandfather had kept, a treasure trove of knowledge tucked away with the dusty remains of a lost legacy. Each page held stories of triumph and innovation, secrets to crafting not just cars, but community and connection. As Mark immersed himself, the tension within twisted into determination. He dusted off old tools, fervently experimenting, each victory over a malfunctioning part gradually restoring his hope. Yet, as his skills sharpened, so did his anxiety. How could he reclaim what had been taken and prove himself against the likes of Mercer? Each invention birthed a thrilling possibility, yet the shadow of failure loomed large. The more innovative he became, the deeper he feared his own inadequacy would be revealed. Then came the midnight call. Jason was launching a campaign to buy out the neighboring towns, threatening to drown Mark's efforts before they could even breathe. Mark clenched his fists, the once subtle uncertainty morphing into a crippling panic. What if the town he loved turned against him, seeing him as a loser who just couldn't keep up? But maybe, just maybe, he could ignite a rebellion of ingenuity against the cold hands of greed. The tension in his chest tightened painfully. He had to confront Mercer. The stakes had grown impossibly high, and with them, his heart pounded with the realization. The hopes of his past and present now weighed on him like a leaden mantle. Mark awoke the next morning, the remnants of sleep heavy in his eyes, and a buzz of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The stakes had reached a boiling point, and the resolve simmering within him was now a cauldron ready to spill over. He pulled on a worn t-shirt and tossed his hair back. He glanced at himself in the mirror, searching for encouragement in his reflection, but all he saw was uncertainty staring back at him. Yet, instead of allowing that uncertainty to paralyze him, he envisioned all the late nights spent in the workshop, hitting the grindstone until his hands blistered, believing that hard work alone could sustain him. The air outside was cool, fresh with the promise of change, Yet Mark felt as though he stood at the edge of a precipice. He made his way to the shop, determination infusing each step. Ideas raced through his mind like an unbroken stallion. He needed more than just repairs. He needed a new vision, a project that would not only showcase his talents, but also build a narrative, a product that could symbolize resilience and defiance against Jason's monopoly. All morning, he strategized between tasks, blending practicality with creativity. He'd fix the vintage car deep within the shop, but maybe he could transform it into a hybrid capable of showcasing innovative engineering. The idea ignited a flame within him, and soon, sketches filled pages, each curve and line expressing his newfound purpose. This wasn't merely a project, it was a statement, a gladiator ready for battle. As the day unfolded, Mark's hands began to build something more than a car. He was crafting self-belief. Experimenting with parts he had salvaged over the years, he found new ways of assembling and reassembling, pushing the boundaries of his knowledge. Each bolt tightened felt like reclaiming a piece of his dignity, the echoes of laughter from childhood driving him onwards. Soon, he caught himself humming the tunes his grandfather used to whistle, those older songs wrapped in hope and nostalgia. Inspiration surged through him like a jolt of electricity. Mark understood that in this age of corporate giants, innovation wasn't merely about technology. It was about heart, a heart that would beat louder than any bottom line. But moments of clarity were often fragmented. As he worked, a creeping doubt would creep in. Was this enough? Would his efforts resonate with the town, or would they drown them out in a sea of corporate homogeneity? Time and again, he had to shake off the thoughts, reminding himself that small beginnings could grow into unstoppable forces. By mid-afternoon, he took a break, leaning against a wall, sweat mingling with the dirt on his forehead. With deep breaths, he pondered his next move. He needed to present his vision, to rally support before Mercer sank his claws deeper into the town, suffocating it under his weight. The thought of Jason's smirk reverberated, a lingering antagonism that pressed against him. Yet amidst the uncertainty, another thought emerged, a whisper of courage. Mark reached for his phone. He would call up his old friends, those who shared his passion for cars and community. They might not just be the foundation of support he needed. They could be his voice when this new project took shape. With resolve hardening within him, Mark dialed the first number, silently vowing that he would not let fear dictate his future. As the phone rang, he steeled himself for optimism. This was the turning point, the start of something much larger than himself. The foundations for his uprising were being laid, and he was ready to rise from the ashes. But as the call connected, Mark heard a voice on the other end he hadn't expected. Jason Mercer, laughing, taunting. "This isn't over, little mechanic. You really think you can take me on?" Mark's heart raced, a mix of fear and fierce determination igniting in his chest. The time had come to face his nemesis. Mark froze, the laughter from Jason's voice echoing in the stillness of the shop. The bravado behind those words was a challenge, a dismissal of everything he had worked for. In that moment, Mark understood that this was more than just a rivalry. It was a confrontation of wills, a battle for identity and space in a world dominated by those who saw others as expendable commodities. "Why are you even calling me, Jason?" Mark forced his voice steady, resisting the urge to let anger and vulnerability collide. "I'm working on something important." "Important?" Jason's tone shifted, a smirk evident even through the phone. "What's really important is knowing your place. You think a few sketches and a dusty workshop can compete with what I'm building? You're wasting your time, Mark." The words, intentionally sharp, pierced deeper than Mark anticipated. But with each cutting remark, a surge of determination surged anew, kindling the flame of his convictions. He imagined the visions he had, the design he was shaping, and the families that depended on a thriving local craft. It was more than just him against Jason. It was about the community and history at stake. "Every empire was built out of nothing," Mark responded, the ferocity building in his tone. "I'm not finished yet, Jason. I might just surprise you. Please, do your best. But let's not pretend this isn't a mismatch, Jason retorted, ending the call with a preemptive smugness. Mark slammed the phone down. Each beat of his heart, a reel of anger and inspiration spiraling within him. The encounter only solidified his resolve. Fear began to fade, replaced by the conviction that he could ignite change. Overwhelmed by a sense of purpose, he took a deep breath and returned to his sketches, eyes glimmering with newfound clarity. His fingers flew across the paper, sketching faster now, formulating a plan that would transcend the mere mechanics of automaking. The vision blossomed, an eco-friendly hybrid vehicle that not only preserved the nostalgia of classic cars, but also boasted modern innovation. This was not just an upgrade. It was a mission statement. He remembered the dialogue he wished to have, the passion that could resonate through the local circuit. He could hold informational sessions, engage with local tech enthusiasts, and transform every bit of skepticism into a rallying cry. Mark could pave a path and invite others to join him on this journey, not just as passive supporters, but as active participants in reshaping their collective future. Suddenly, a thought struck him. Jason had dismissed him, underestimating the very community he aimed to uplift. With fresh motivation, Mark started drafting out flyers, something simple that could encapsulate his energy and approach. "Join the revolution," it would read. "Rethink the ride. Drive your dreams." As the evening wore on, he felt the urgency of his actions flow through him. He spent hours preparing his words, rehearsing them in front of the mirror, visualizing the moment when he would finally present his idea to those who mattered. The town could be swayed. They just needed to see the worth in local innovation beyond Jason's iron grip. And yet, within this motivating surge, a shadow lurked, an unsettling reminder of Jason's reach, his possible moves in response to Mark's awakening. Mark needed an ally, someone with clout to back him when he presented his vision. Who could he turn to? As he pondered desperately, the phone buzzed with a message from a longtime friend in the local council. "Mark, let's meet. I have a feeling you might need some help." The weight of possibility fell upon him like a cloak, thick with anticipation. This could be the thread he needed to pull on, but it could also draw the ire of Jason into his world. "Whatever happens next," he whispered to himself, "I have to be ready." And as Mark stood at the precipice of this new chapter, the tension was palpable. The line was drawn, and the battle for his autonomy had only just begun, marked with potential consequences that could either lift him to greater heights or drown him in despair. As dawn broke, Mark stood in his workshop, the harsh fluorescent lights casting a stark glow on the clutter surrounding him. The tension from the previous night hung in the air, intermingling with the scent of motor oil and fresh paint. He felt hyper-aware of every noise, the world outside continuing its symphony while he contemplated his next move. He had promised himself he wouldn't let fear dictate his actions, yet anxiety wove its way back into his thoughts. Could he truly challenge Jason? With determination surging in his veins, Mark began to prepare for his meeting with Sarah, his friend on the council. He had known her for years, their paths intertwining through community initiatives. She was a pragmatic thinker with influence, and her insights could elevate his vision beyond mere sketches. They could transform it into reality. Arriving at the cafe, he felt his pulse quicken. The place buzzed with morning chatter, a stark contrast to the quietude of his workshop. As he waited, he rehearsed the pitch in his mind. Would it resonate? Would she believe in his dream as he did? When Sarah arrived, her warm smile put him at ease, but the gravity of what he wanted to discuss loomed heavily. Over coffee, they exchanged pleasantries, but he couldn't shake the urgency pressing in on him. "Mark, you seem on edge," Sarah observed, her brow slightly furrowed. "What's going on?" With a deep breath, he let the words spill out, layering his plight with fervor. He spoke of Jason, of the dismissive call, and the vision for an eco-friendly vehicle, how it could change the automotive landscape and re-inject hope into the local craft. The words tumbled forth, each carrying the weight of his fears and aspirations. As he spoke, he could see the spark ignite in her eyes. "This is bold, Mark," she replied thoughtfully. "But we both know Jason won't lie down easily. He has resources, influence. You need to prepare for some serious opposition." Her acknowledgement of his ambition stoked the fire inside him. "I know," he admitted, "but I believe in the community. They deserve options, not just the status quo defined by guys like Jason. I need your support to rally them. Perhaps use the council's platform to host a discussion." Sarah nodded, her expression shifting to contemplation. "I think we can organize something, maybe even a public forum. But you need to be strategic. You have to present not just your idea, but also how it directly benefits the town. Gather endorsements, data if you can. Make them see it's not just a passion project but a viable opportunity." Mark felt a rush of exhilaration wash over him. This was the kind of validation he had sought. Real support in the face of battle. They spent the next hour planning how to articulate his vision, devising strategies to garner interest and engagement. By the end of their meeting, what once felt like an insurmountable challenge now appeared to be a mountain he could climb. However, as they concluded, a nagging thought tugged at him. Jason would retaliate. He would not allow Mark to undermine his empire without a fight. It was only a matter of time. In the days that followed, Mark immersed himself in preparation. He crafted flyers, researched best practices for community engagement, and even reached out to local small business owners to garner support. Each stride felt empowering, building his confidence brick by brick. Yet the anxiety lingered, hovering like a storm cloud overhead. Then, just as he began to feel momentum building, an unexpected twist struck. A text from Jason appeared on his phone. "You're going to need more than hope to stand against me." Mark's heart raced. The implications were unmistakable. Jason was on to him, and the game had officially begun. "Why do I feel like the real battle is just starting?" he muttered to himself, a mix of dread and resolve coursing through him. As he pondered his next steps, one thing became clear. He needed to embrace the fight ahead, harness his creativity, and prepare himself for a confrontation. The stakes were higher than just his vision. It was about redefining his role in a landscape where others underestimated him. With every ounce of determination coalesced within him, Mark lifted his chin and began drafting his response to Jason, not just in words, but in action. The real challenge lay ahead, and he was ready to face it. But as the evening drew closer, a troubling question echoed in the depths of his mind. Was he truly prepared for the repercussions of going against someone as formidable as Jason? That uncertainty loomed like a harbinger of what was to come, pushing Mark into a stark realization. The moment of truth was approaching fast. Mark paced through his workshop, the clanging of tools reverberating like a heartbeat in the solitude. Each step felt heavier than the last, his thoughts swirling around Jason's taunt. What had started as an ordinary day now felt charged with apprehension. The deadline for his proposal to the council loomed ahead, but so did the specter of Jason's influence. He had to shift the narrative. He picked up a wrench, twisting it absent-mindedly in his hands. The action served as a grounding technique, a reminder that he was still capable of manipulating his environment, both physically and metaphorically. Each tool, each part he had meticulously arranged around him, represented his abilities, his knowledge. He could create something new, something different, not just for himself, but for others as well. By evening, he had gathered the last of the data he felt necessary to make his case. He meticulously assembled the documentation into a concise portfolio, his confidence fortifying with each sheet he organized. Fact after fact showcased the industry's need for change, the reality of the energy crisis, and how his design could lead to a more sustainable future. More importantly, he outlined how his proposition could inject life into their local economy. The scent of motor oil hung thick in the air, intermingling with the bittersweet smell of anticipation and dread. He fought back a wave of self-doubt as the shadows deepened. What if he failed? The thought lingered like a stubborn ink stain. But then he reconsidered. He had nothing to lose. Wasn't that the very essence of innovation? To step into uncharted territory armed only with conviction and well-researched data? With a changed mindset, Mark decided to confront his fears head-on. He sent the proposal to Sarah, hopeful that her support would bolster his argument. It was time to re-engage. The looming council meeting could be the turning point he desperately sought. As night settled in, though, the text from Jason haunted him. Fear wound tightly around his stomach. What kind of retaliation would he face? He churned through scenarios, from smear campaigns to attempts to recruit local businesses, to dismantle his credibility. The notion of standing alone against such a powerful opponent made his resolve waver momentarily. Yet in the midst of that chaos, a certain revelation dawned on him. What if he embraced the very attributes that made him unassuming? His status as a regular mechanic made him relatable. Jason might have resources, but Mark had authenticity and connection. He had lived and breathed the same struggles that plagued others in the community. He understood their needs. Driven by this insight, he decided to reach out to those small business owners he had previously contacted. He would not just involve them for their signatures, he would invite them to be stakeholders in his vision. He sent out emails late into the night, soliciting meetings, seeking collaboration. If Jason could build an empire, why couldn't he build an alliance? The next morning, an email notification from Sarah interrupted his thoughts. The council meeting's attendance had exceeded expectations. People were interested, eager to hear his pitch. "This is your moment, Mark," he whispered to himself, staring at the screen. But the weight of Jason's presence still loomed. Instead of fueling his anxiety, it sparked an unexpected ambition. He refused to be intimidated anymore. In the workshop, he quickly checked on the prototype, ensuring everything was in place to demonstrate his plans vividly. Mark's strategy shifted from just defending himself against Jason's tyranny to actively showing the community why his vision mattered. The battle was not just to win against Jason, but to inspire others to join him. As the tension loomed over the workshop, excitement replaced the heaviness in his heart. He was ready, but uncertainty still flickered in his mind. Could he truly galvanize the community and give Jason a fight? The real challenge was now unfolding before him, and it was time for a showdown. The moment of truth was on the horizon, and he was determined that this time, fear would not dictate his actions. But as he moved closer to the meeting, a new anxiety gripped him. How would Jason respond if he took the stage and began to rally support? Would he overreach or rise to become more than just an ordinary mechanic? The day of the council meeting arrived, and Mark felt the weight of anticipation tugging at his insides like an aggressive wind. He stepped into the town hall, his heart fluttering as he scanned the room filled with faces, friends, acquaintances, and a few skeptical glances from the back. The tension was palpable, a tight leash binding them all in shared curiosity, wonder, and perhaps a dash of disbelief that he, Mark the mechanic, would dare to propose such a radical idea. He found his seat among the other speakers, an ocean of polished suits and confident demeanors. Mark felt out of place, his worn jeans and grease-stained shirt a stark contrast to the formal attire surrounding him. But instead of retreating into that feeling of inadequacy, he focused on the principles he was about to present. This was not simply about him. It was about innovation, sustainability, and the people who would benefit from his initiative. As the speaker before him finished, an invisible hand pushed him forward. Mark stood up, forcing his legs to move, and approached the podium. The room quieted, the shift in energy leaving him both exhilarated and nauseous. He cleared his throat and began, his voice shaking slightly but growing steadier with each passing second. His presentation unfolded like a well-oiled machine, data pouring forth seamlessly, each slide reinforcing the connection between his proposals and the community's pressing needs. He noticed nods of agreement ripple through the audience, and with each response, his confidence grew stronger. He shared his vision not just as a mechanic, but as a solution provider, challenging long-standing practices with the promise of a brighter, more sustainable future. Yet, as he spoke, Mark couldn't ignore the cold presence of Jason, whose scrutinizing gaze bore into him from the back of the room. The man's aura was overpowering, radiating authority and disdain, melding into a toxic concoction of intimidation. Mark's heart raced as he imagined the counter-arguments Jason would muster, forms of sabotage no doubt taking shape in that calculating mind. But Mark pushed through, articulating how his proposal would not only help local businesses save on energy costs, but also present opportunities for job creation in their small town. The applause that followed his presentation momentarily drowned out the anxious murmurs rising from Jason's corner. Mark sat back down, adrenaline coursing through him. He felt the air shift when Jason finally stood to answer. The room held its collective breath, every eye fixed on the multimillionaire. Jason exuded confidence, his smooth words rippling through the gathered crowd like silk. He dismissed Mark's proposal with a condescending tone, framing it as a naive idealism that would lead to failure. "You see, folks," Jason began, his voice rich with skepticism, "the average mechanic lacks the business acumen necessary to initiate changes at this scale." The sting of those words was sharp, and Mark wrestled with a surge of anger. Was that true? Had he underestimated the breadth of his challenge? But he quickly reminded himself of his promise to embrace his authenticity. He remembered why he stood there, at the front, presenting a vision born from real understanding and lived experience. They weren't just numbers to him. They were people, families striving to make ends meet, including the very entrepreneurs Jason had dismissed as insignificant. When the audience murmured, a glimmer of support emerged amongst the hesitation. Mark felt a surge of purpose, fueled by reminders of each person he had reached out to, each email he had sent rallying support. Suddenly, he raised his hand, heart pounding as he proposed a challenge. "If Jason believes in his strategy, let's open the floor for a community vote." It was a bold move that threw Jason off balance, but Mark knew he had to seize the moment, trusting in the trust he had built with those he had reached out to. Eyes darted back and forth, caught in the swirling tension between them. Would this bold call for solidarity end in triumph or dismay? As murmurs of discussion spread through the room like a wildfire, Mark felt the pulse of possibility flickering in his chest. But as voices rose in debate, one question began to loom larger than the rest. Would the support he had reached for stand firm against Jason's overwhelming influence? In this clash of vision that defined him as both mechanic and advocate, he could not shake the sense that the real confrontation was just beginning. As the murmurs of skepticism and curiosity began to swirl in the room, Mark found himself reeling from the gravity of his bold assertion. His heart raced as Jason's piercing gaze bore into him, a testament to the challenge he had just laid out. The chatter along the rows of seats was both thrilling and terrifying, as people deliberated over Mark's audacious push against a powerful figure. Would this moment galvanize support, or seal his fate as a mere mechanic without the necessary connections? Mark could feel a cocktail of trepidation and determination bubbling within him. This was his moment, not just to advocate for change, but to transform his identity in the eyes of his peers. He refused to be relegated to the role of the underdog left gasping for air beneath the weight of someone like Jason. He shifted in his seat, trying to appear calm while mentally strategizing his next steps. He needed a plan. Jason's confident voice, smooth and deliberate, cut through the noise. "Let's be clear. This isn't a game," he stated, and his words prompted an uneasy silence. "You are risking the stability of this community for a dream." His tone dripped with disdain as he wielded authority like a weapon, undermining everything Mark had just proposed. Yet underneath the veneer of Jason's superiority, Mark recognized the cracks in the man's facade. He was scared of what genuine change could do to the status quo. That thought began to bolster Mark's resolve. Maybe, just maybe, this challenge was the key to awakening not only support from the community, but a deeper understanding in himself. He refocused on the crowd before him. While Jason commanded instant attention, it was Mark's humanity that could resonate deeper. He leaned forward slightly, engaging those listening. "You know my history. You know the struggles that stretch before us. But what if the tried and true systems and practices have run their course? What if we dared to innovate, to redefine our approaches beyond the limits of tradition? A few heads nodded, a faint but hopeful sign. While Jason had amassed wealth and influence, Mark possessed something profoundly more valuable, a connection to the people he aimed to serve. He couldn't let their unequal contest deter his dreams. Instead, it could illuminate a path forward. Then suddenly, a voice from the audience emerged. "But Mark, can you genuinely back this up?" It was Carol, a local shop owner he'd spoken with before. "Where will the funding come from? What assurances do we have this will work?" Right there, Mark had to confront a palpable truth. Could he deliver on the promise of his proposal? Wouldn't 4 years of grease-stained hands in a garage pale against the financial expertise Jason boasted? However, the passion igniting within him quelled the doubts momentarily. We forge partnerships, bring new people into decision-making processes, and collaborate. Imagine a network of support, local businesses working together, generating ideas that contribute to the greater good, lifting every corner of our community. He felt a subtle shift, a sense of solidarity with Carol and the others who had been raising the questions he feared. It struck him then. This wasn't just about facing Jason. It was about confronting his own insecurities and rising above them. He was not merely a mechanic. He was a visionary, grounded in practical experience who dared to dream bigger. The room pulsated with energy as voices rose once more. Mark's steadiness remained as vital as ever. He could see new thoughts igniting among familiar faces. Perhaps he wasn't done surprising himself yet. Then, amidst the chaos of voices rallying for and against him, Jason's voice cut through again, eerily calm. "If you want to vote, then let's vote. But let's keep it clear. You're amateurs challenging a businessman's understanding of the world. Mark may have heart, but it will take more than heart to change anything here." That final remark hung heavily in the air, setting the stage for not just a vote, but for Mark's ultimate test. Confidence surged upon witnessing the growing support around him, yet the stakes felt heavier than ever. As he prepared to address the crowd again, weighty questions filled his mind. What if this was the moment that defined his path? Could he truly bring the community together against the very man who had so casually dismissed him? The journey ahead wasn't merely about tactics or convincing others. It was a confrontation with himself, his identity as a mechanic aspiring to be something greater. And with the decisive moment looming, Mark could only grasp onto the hope that the future he envisioned was worth all the risk ahead. As he inhaled deeply, preparing for his next words, a chilling realization struck him. Jason was not just fighting for his business. He was fighting for something larger. The question remained, could Mark inspire a resolve that would rival Jason's power without losing himself in the process? Mark's heart thumped loudly in his chest as the ambient noise settled, tension thickening the air around him. He leaned into the moment, every muscle in his body taut as he prepared to make his voice resonate within the gathering. There was no turning back, and deep down he realized surrender was never an option. "Let's take a step back," Mark began, his tone steady but urgent. "Heart is vital, yes, but so is planning. I've spent years in the trenches, and I know what's needed. We can't just wish for change. We must structure it, nurture it, and watch it grow. I'm here today to open the door to an entirely new approach. Risk is inherent to innovation." A ripple of murmurs passed through the audience, more interested now, some frowning thoughtfully, while others looked eager. Every gaze felt like a weight settling upon his shoulders, both a pressure and a propellant pushing him forward. He visualized hands working in tandem, an unorthodox coalition poised to amplify their collective strength and talents. Yet with this vision came doubt. What if they did rally behind him, only to find they had no real means to sustain it? Questions about funding and implementation flew around like arrows. Each inquiry, a challenge to his competence. What right did he have to lead when he hadn't done this before? "Look," Mark spoke again, abruptly righting those disquieting thoughts. He took a breath, steadying himself. I get it. It's easy to feel jittery about venturing into uncharted territory, especially against someone like Jason. But every person in here has something to contribute. We all embody a piece of the puzzle, and together we can build a plan. Noticing the flicker of resolve in Carol's eyes and nods from a few others bolstered his confidence. Perhaps the facade of inexperience that tried to encapsulate him could be broken down. Perhaps they could all learn and grow together. A slight stir drew his attention to Jason, whose expression had morphed into one of incredulous contempt. You think you can orchestrate a community plan with nothing but optimism? He sneered, voice laced with arrogance. Ideas without funds are just vapor. Mark's stomach twisted, but instead of succumbing to insecurity, a fire reignited within him. You're not wrong about the funds, Jason. Every great idea needs backing, but it starts with building trust. The resources will come when people believe in the vision. I want to explore avenues. We'll seek grants, local partnerships, and even government support together. This is not a solo endeavor. With every word, Mark unwittingly sculpted a new version of himself. Not just a mechanic proposing a dream, but an advocate wielding knowledge as a tool for progress. Jason may have connections, he continued, confidence solidifying with each sentence. But our strength lies in our people. We can forecast challenges and adapt to them. We are not amateurs. We are entrepreneurs, custodians of our community's growth. The atmosphere shifted palpably as murmurs turned to louder conversations, and the audience began re-engaging with each other in excited tones. Like thunder rolling in the distance, support surged around him, and for the first time, Mark could sense a movement happening within the hearts of those present. Jason's icy demeanor faltered slightly, a crack in his armor. It was refreshing to see someone like him rattled. Mark was emboldened by the realization that he had ignited something deeper than mere support. He had started a conversation around identity and accountability. As he prepared to wrap up, a thought lingered at the edges of his mind. He had transformed, but the most crucial step still lay before him. If they sided with him, they would need steadfast leadership and comprehensive preparation. And what came next? That intimidating vote would reveal their willingness to embrace change over discomfort, unity over division. But before he could articulate another invitation to engage, a single pungent truth crystallized in his mind. This path toward change would not come without significant sacrifice. Could he endure the weight of leadership and the fear of failure, knowing that he was offering hope to those who might follow? The question hung like a guillotine above him, foreboding, yet exhilarating. Amidst the shifting dialogues igniting around him, one thing became clear. Mark was not merely fighting against Jason. It was shaping up to be a confrontation with everything he thought he knew about himself and his capabilities. The time had come for him to truly discover what leadership meant. Could he transform potential into actual change, or would he falter beneath the pressure? Mark stood silently, the clamor of conversation swirling around him, yet the noise felt distant. His heart raced, echoing the challenge that lay ahead. Stepping forward, he gripped the edge of the podium, drawing strength from the wood grain's rough texture. The crowd's energy buzzed like electricity, invigorating yet intimidating, sharpening his focus on the pivotal moments they were upon. Let's turn our attention to the future, he urged, his voice clearer and more determined. We cannot simply react to challenges. We must anticipate them, be proactive in our approach. He could see apprehension etched on some faces, but also the glimmers of hope. Mark's mind raced with possibilities. He envisioned strategies that could merge their strengths, a combination of ingenuity and persistence that could leverage existing resources. Each voting member was like a spoke in a wheel. Together they could drive change or fall apart, reliant on a single fracture. The pressure was fierce, like a weight pressing into his chest, reminding him that he couldn't afford to stumble now. Jennifer, you're an expert in community relations. Could we use your insights to refine our outreach? He asked, trying to galvanize specific talents within the group. Each mention created a ripple of acknowledgement, a small but vital step toward collective responsibility. Mark felt like a student pulling together a makeshift team project. He was learning, adapting as he navigated these first trepidations of leadership. But self-doubt still nagged. The stakes felt insurmountable. What if he led them astray? And then there was Jason. His lingering hostility was an ever-present reminder of the challenges they faced, not just in resources but in trust. Mark refused to let that enmity define him. Instead, he'd use it as a driving force. As conversations continued, Mark did a quick assessment of his own strengths. Could he harness creativity effectively? He had always considered himself a hands-on mechanic, not a visionary, yet here he was, bending the very definitions he had set for himself. Igniting those around him was an unfamiliar but exhilarating task. The vote approached like a dark cloud, its outcome uncertain. He felt his thoughts shift toward the possibility of failure and rejection, but he pushed back against that mental landscape. What would happen if they did vote against his proposals? With the realization that whatever the result, he would gain wisdom through the experience, Mark embraced the fear, turning it into a source of motivation. Preparing for the vote felt less about mere numbers and more about fostering a culture of accountability within the team. Jason's connections may be vast, but that doesn't ensure genuine commitment. Commitment comes from belief. Belief in each other, Mark proclaimed, feeling his words resonate within the group. And then, like a silent climactic wave, the moment slipped closer. The dais inched toward the decision that would define whether they followed his lead. Mark realized this was it. This was the crucible. He had to show courage, both for himself and for them. Could he trust them to support his vision? When the time for the vote arrived, he felt the weight of their gazes like twin boulders pressing down on him. Hesitation coursed through the air. If they showed up to cast their votes, they would have to share in his struggle. And with that, a profound question emerged. Would they be willing to make sacrifices alongside him? As the ballots unfolded and anticipation electrified the atmosphere, Mark's mind raced with a renewed fear. What if they were unwilling to invest in the vision he had laid before them? Would that render his journey a fool's errand? As the voting commenced, he wondered just how much he could stake on this fragile alliance when the foundation felt as though it was still building itself around him. The tension thickened unnaturally, leaving him breathless. And then a thought flashed through his mind. What was he truly risking, and what was the reward he sought? Would he emerge with newfound clarity, or become swallowed by the very shadow of doubt he fought so hard against? The realization lurked. This wasn't just about a vote. It was about transformation. A transformation that could redefine everything he thought he knew about himself and his place within their community. As the last papers were collected, the air hung heavy with anticipation. What would this vote reveal about his worthiness as a leader, and more importantly, about the potential futures that lay in wait? The results were announced within minutes. Yet every second felt like an eternity, the silence in the council chamber growing suffocating. Mark held his breath, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He could feel the quickening beat of his heart as his senses heightened, anticipation coursing through his veins. The clerk read the results with painstaking slowness. 23 in favor, and 12 against. A wave of relief rushed over him. Adrenaline pulsed through his body. It was real. He had won the vote. The community had stood with him, embracing a vision that had once seemed so far out of reach. Cheers erupted from the audience, a sound like music to his ears. But Mark's own voice felt trapped in his throat. He had expected this moment to feel euphoric, but as the noise washed over him, he realized it signified what lay ahead. "Thank you!" he shouted finally, his voice cracking but filled with genuine gratitude. "Thank you for believing in innovation, in your community." But even as the cheers echoed, he felt a heavy realization settle in. The true battle was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Mark mobilized his newfound coalition of supporters into action. The enthusiasm was palpable as he organized community workshops, teaching locals about sustainability in car manufacturing and how they could begin embracing this within their own businesses. He witnessed firsthand the transformation of skepticism into excitement, the willingness of people to engage and learn. His journey was no longer solitary. It was a collaboration of shared commitment. Mark's proposal began to attract attention beyond the town. The local news ran a feature on his innovative approach, highlighting not just a new hybrid vehicle, but a blueprint for community revival. As the articles circulated, invitations poured in from nearby towns interested in replicating his model. People began referring to him not just as a mechanic, but as a pioneer, an identity that felt both surreal and empowering. With this recognition came valuable partnerships. Grants were awarded, and local investors eager to pivot towards eco-sustainability approached him, wanting to be part of the initial prototype. Fulfilling his entrepreneurial spirit, Mark embraced the challenges ahead with a grit he had cultivated in the solitude of his workshop. Each measurable step proclaimed his evolving role not merely as an innovator, but as a leader galvanizing change. Through the whirlwind of progress, an unshakable confidence took root within him. Mark didn't just build a prototype vehicle that embodied his vision, he galvanized a movement that engaged a community yearning for sustainable change. Standing in his workshop one bright morning, surrounded by an engaged team of local craftsmen adapting their skills to support the project, he felt a sense of completeness. He finally understood that his journey was not just defined by the vehicles he crafted, but by the roots he nurtured in the community. Looking in the mirror that once reflected an uncertain mechanic struggling for validation, he found a galvanizing leader who embraced resilience and possibility. Mark's commitment to innovation had transformed into a legacy built on authenticity, trust, and collaborative progress. Each person who joined him breathed energy into the vision, transforming mere mechanics into vital components of a larger vision. When the prototype was unveiled, the town celebrated not just a vehicle, but the rebirth of their community ethos, a testimony to the power of collective spirit over corporate greed. The day marked a new beginning, not just for Mark, but for everyone who dared to imagine what could be possible when the status quo is challenged. With a voice full of conviction, Mark stepped onto the stage for the unveiling, addressing the crowd packed with familiar faces, friends he had rallied to this point. This is just the beginning. Together, we're not just paving the way for cars. We're strengthening the very foundation of this community. Let's keep pushing forward. His message rang true, resonating with those who had joined him in the journey of personal and communal transformation. As cheers filled the air and proud tears welled in the eyes of friends and family, Mark recognized that while challenges may lie ahead, he had profoundly changed. He had gone beyond expectations, reframed the narrative, and built something that transcended individual ambition. Mark was no longer just a mechanic. He had become a beacon of hope, innovation, and resilience within his town. Now was the time for everyone to reflect on their own power to forge paths unseen. It was the moment to inspire others to become architects of their destiny, sculptors of their community's future. Every moment, every connection he had made led him here. He had not just achieved personal growth, but ignited something much more significant, an enduring spark of collective resilience that reminded everyone. Together, they could achieve the extraordinary. So now, you must take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure more people discover these incredible journeys. Comment your thoughts and theories about how Mark's story resonates with you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.